context to this story because the headline is quite inflammatory. Now, in 2008, the basic salaries and allowances for judicial officers and public officers, including the elected ones, was last done. Since then, from 2008 to date, that's a period of 15 years, we've seen a 371% increase in the consumer price index of selected foodstuffs and services. Now, the revenue and the RMAFC is recommending 114% increase in the basic salary, and this is being backdated to January 2023. Now, in itself, it is not a bad decision because we have to be realistic. If the salaries were last reviewed in 2008, there have been at least two or three depressions. There was a global depression of 2008, and we've had our mini series of depressions, and we've come out of each one. We've also seen the effect of inflation on the value of the naira and on the consuming spending power of the Nigerian public. We've also seen inflation hit Nigeria hard. So this in itself is not bad. Now, what is questionable is the timing, especially for the elected public officials, because let's be honest, right? A number of them have found a way to maneuver around the law. So you have governors exiting office with very wonderful exit packages because they've gotten the state houses of assemblies to pass pension laws for them. So the governors are good. And I dare say even the National Assembly is good. Now, at a point, at a critical period like this, how do we justify, how can it be justified to the Nigerian public that politicians and elected public officers will see a 114% increase in salaries? And this is on the back of the removal of the petrol subsidy and the devaluation of the naira, the free float of the naira. It will then look as if the governing class is only concerned about itself. Now, there is an exception. We must take the judicial officers out of this mix. And I say this because they are tasked with doing a very important job, which is interpreting the law and upholding law and order and ensuring that people who breach the law are tried and, if found guilty, accordingly sentenced and convicted and sentenced. Now, for our judges, for our judicial officers not to be susceptible to bribes and criminal cash inducements, they have to be paid properly. They have to be paid a living wage. And I note with some satisfaction they've introduced three new allowances for them. And one, they include an allowance for a professional development assistant, a long service allowance, and a restricted lifestyle allowance. Now, why a restricted lifestyle? Judicial officers are meant to be sober. They're meant to be heard of, not necessarily seen. You're not supposed to see your judicial officer at every naming ceremony, every birthday ceremony, every wedding ceremony. You're not supposed to see him in the clubs. You're not supposed to see him in restaurants all the time. You're not supposed to see him at the lounges. You're not supposed to see him at the beach consistently. So because he has to make all those sacrifices, then you have to some extent compensate him. And the reason why they're not expected to be seen a lot is because if you don't see them a lot and the only times you really see them are in the courtroom, there's little or no room to then try to attempt to induce them with cash or other material gifts.
So they have to be compensated for not having a social life.
Look, so you're looking at it as compensation. We're trying to cure something. Something needs to be cured. The tendency, because if you don't pay a worker well, there's always a tendency to look for ways to supplement that cash. And where a judicial officer is not paid properly, and then an interested party makes a material cash inducement offer to him to sway judgment in his favor, what are the what are the chances or what are the odds that this particular judicial officer will be able to turn down that offer. So you have to put him in a position where he's comfortable enough, he can send his children to school. He's not worrying about school fees, he's not worrying about housing because housing is supposed to be provided, he's not worrying about healthcare, so that he can devote all of his time, all of his concentration to the task before him, which is interpreting the law and handing down the judgments. Now, where does this leave organized labor? Because they've been, in my opinion, they've been monkeying around for the past 2 or 3 weeks. They haven't hit the nail on the head. They missed the opportunity to properly interrogate the leading three candidates during the last election, and now they're chasing they're chasing a horse really. So, in the light of this, what is Labour's response? Because this, I assure Nigerians, will be done. This is a done deal. And given the fact it's going to be retroactively backdated to January 2023, you can imagine the amount of money that's already gone. So now for the Nigerian public workforce, for the civil servants, what does this bode for them? If the politicians could get 114% increase in basic salary, will we even see the average Nigerian worker getting a 50%? Very doubtful. The bigger question, where is this money coming from? This 100 that is funding the 114%. Where exactly is it coming from? Are we printing more money? Are we borrowing more money? Or our late sugar daddy, General Abacha, has sent to us in? These are questions we need to ask. And for how long will this be sustained? Because we must remember, right, that there are a number of states that struggle to pay basic salaries. It's a real struggle. Now you've increased it by 114%. How are they going to do it?
Well, let us know what your thoughts are. WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. From Vanguard, the Nigerian Immigration Service on Wednesday has advised its officers and men to clamp down on all forms of sexual exploitation around border communities in the state, specifically Akwa Ibom State. Gbubemi?
Okay, so this was expressed by the comptroller at the Akwa Ibom Command in during a gender mainstreaming workshop that all of the officers under the command were attending, and the workshop was essentially intended to equip them with the knowledge of immigration service gender policies framework on gender issues, how to deal with gender-based violence, sexual exploitation, and abuse. It's very important that our immigration officials are brought up to speed, especially regarding gender issues. Now, we all know how our border towns can be, especially our land borders, and there had previously been reports that immigration officials would take advantage of ordinary citizens, whether in terms of exploiting them, even economically, even up to the point of sexual harassment. Partly, I would say maybe partly some of these things regarding the harassment would have come from from a mindset, that sees, male dominance, for example. So if we could attribute it to ignorance at a certain point, if we could, then we can assume that this workshop would do a bit to enlighten them. But I think it's also important to staff such places with a fairly adequate amount of female employees as well, female officers as well. It's one thing for them to go through the training, it's another thing for people to be able to understand directly how these issues affect people. So with a staffing of a lot more female officers at such places, they will hopefully be able to curb and check their male colleagues if it ever comes to that. It also spoke about how this ties into the modernizing of the Nigerian Immigration Service, which is, something that should have been done ever since, because we see the need for them to be upskilled, not just even in terms of gender issues, but generally across all of their skills and experiences. and it's very important that they understand these things so that they can be prepared for work.
All right, thank you, Gbubemi. Let's go on to some messages coming through. Ajayi says it's interesting that the salaries of political office holders are being speedily reviewed, even as millions of ordinary Nigerian workers are groaning under the weight of fuel subsidy removal without any hope of how and what palliatives will come their way. Guru says, do the judicial officers have mobile phones? Why do I need to see them? Why is it only the elite that need to be taken care of so they don't get corrupt? And Philip says, okay, our leaders cannot continue to ask us to give while they continue to take. It's not proper. What exactly is an average Nigerian benefiting from the government? Now you see what they think of us. They don't really care about us. And let's go on to this one from Shegun. Shegun says, this is an opportunity for Labour Party and opposition legislators to show they are different by rejecting the proposed pay rises. All right, let's go on to the next headline. Don't forget the WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981 from Punch. About 100 top officers, including generals, brigadier generals, air vice marshals, and admirals in the Army, Air Force, and Navy, may proceed on compulsory retirement following the appointment of new service chiefs by the President on Monday.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. So this is the latest episode in a long line of recent developments where a new president assumes office and then he appoints a much junior officer to the existing service chiefs. And once that happens, every senior officer above him has to retire.
Mm.
And they have continued this tradition. Now, I do not know where they learned or picked up this tradition from, but it doesn't make any sense, and I'm going to explain. Nigeria has invested a lot of resources, cash and material, into each and every one of these senior officers. They've been sent for courses within Nigeria and outside Nigeria, from England to the States to India, even to Australia or Canada, I dare say. And you cannot begin to imagine the volume or the quantum of resources that have been placed into each of these guys. And some of them will probably have 6 to 10 years left. But because a much junior officer has been appointed, they're then forced to retire prematurely. And that wealth of experience, that wealth of knowledge is suddenly lost. Now, two, when you retire a number of people at the same time, it creates a burden because they're now entitled to allowances post service, from pension to medical benefits. And each of these officers is probably entitled to a military guard or to a military aid. These come with huge financial obligations. Now, they've told us, of course, when these 100 retire, people will step up. But when will we start to stop the trade? Why can't the leaders pick new service chiefs from the existing crop or the crop at the top? And it's the same thing in, I dare say, in the other paramilitary organizations. So we're looking at the Nigerian Police Force. We're looking at Customs, the Nigerian Customs Service. The current acting Comptroller General is actually number 4 in the hierarchy. Now, what that means is number 1 has been replaced. So numbers 2 and 3 will have to go because they will not be expected to take instructions from someone who is considered to be the subordinate in terms of service. So it's a clarion call to the government that you need to revisit this position, you need to revisit this practice. Let's stop losing our best minds, our best hands collectively. It's a different thing if 2 or 5 officers were retiring each year, but 100 at a fell swoop, that is a huge loss. And I'm not sure any other developed country, from China to the States to the UK to Germany to France to Australia to New Zealand, has this practice. So they need to drop it. Pick from the existing crop and save Nigeria unnecessary financial obligations hitting home concurrently at the same time.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. C. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Do stay with us, the conversation continues.
Music is life, and life is music. Here on Smooth
And those benefits are for life.
98.1.
Of course not.
I go by the name Santa. Don't touch that dial.
Let's have you seen story?
You
Is
are
there
an
no more
orchestra.
volume?
Watching you move
Let's sing.
is like listening to a symphony of body parts directed by a maestro. When you walk, it is like watching a G clef stroll across an
It's
octave
not booming.
centered by a
No,
C
She
sharp.
says,
it
It's a
went
bit
like I
better
saw
now.
it too. It went
Cadence of your
zip, but
voice is a
I thought maybe it's because of that, but
If you know how Buhari
I've turned
pronounces
it up
change,
to
pitch.
you
leave
didn't
the
ask
light.
which
no,
which
no.
I
change.
saw what you were
We
saying
are
at the
asking.
point.
That's the ask.
I mean the general take. This shock
on
now.
This is just
It's going to send us into cardiac arrest.
It's all through or back bar. It's the
Wow,
breakfast
I
show.
didn't even know
Smooth
that.
98.
Okay, we're going back on.
Why?
The best combination of radio and coffee.
Why not?
Smooth 98.1. This is Freshly Pressed. We're looking at the news stories making the headlines. Our analysts this morning, Mr. C and Gbubemi, are in, and let us know what your thoughts are. WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981. We're streaming live on YouTube, so you can just search for Smooth 981 on YouTube, and you can also post a comment on there. The Ondo State government owned Olusegun Agagu University of Science and Technology has reportedly sacked over 30 workers of the institution, and this has caused some protests. Blueberry?
Okay, so the report further says that these affected workers were employed only a few months ago. We're not quite sure, but it appears as though they were employed over 6 months ago, and the institution fired them. So apparently, the chairman of the Joint Action Committee had asked the university to immediately reverse the decision, and had further stated that initially the university had denied this, but eventually it was found out, you know, that's what had happened. Well, what I'd like to say is typically an organization, an institution has the right to hire or fire as long as they follow their laid down laws and procedures regarding such. Especially with the civil service, we know that, you know, typically you wouldn't just wake up and fire someone without following the proper laid down procedure established in the civil service code for that. Why the organization has done this, I am not sure. But first and foremost, it would be interesting to find out what their terms of employment originally are. Were these employees hired as full-time workers, or did they have a term contract? What were they also hired for? Was there a specific duration? It doesn't also say whether they are academic staff or non-academic staff. I would assume that they are non-academic staff, or else would have probably also had, ASU in the mix. At the very worst, it says that the university will release a statement on the issue, so maybe we'll probably wait to hear from the university. But over and beyond, if at all the university does not rescind its decision, the workers will most likely, I would expect that the workers will take themselves to the National Industrial Court to seek, what's that word, to seek redress if it ever comes to that. And then the National Industrial Court will determine whether they have a case to either be reinstated or compensated, or whether they don't even have a case at all.
All right, thank you for that, Buwemi. Let's see. Tayo says every time we take one step forward, we take 114 steps back. Okay, how did they manage to calculate such costs and expect us to tighten our belt? Because times are hard. I'm living my life in an irony. Abbas says at that level of the managerial position in the military, they're political and not majorly the main administrative level. At the point of administrative, which the new ones are picked from, you must have gotten all the experience needed. Retiring all the seniors gives others the opportunity to rise up the ladder too and contribute their own part to their constituencies. Okay, let's go on to the next headline from Vanguard. The Debt Management Office has warned the federal government against additional borrowing. They're stating that 73.5% of revenue generated this year will be used to service debts. Breathe in, breathe out.
Thank you, Zibby. So, on this show, we've been saying it for a while that Nigeria is broke, bordering almost on the bankrupt. And a lot of listeners have doubted that claim. Now, the Debt Management Office is telling Nigerians that this year, 2023, for every 100 naira Nigeria makes or receives as revenue, 73 naira 50 kobo will be used to service existing debts. So what that means is Nigeria is left with 26 naira 50 kobo. You have not paid salaries with the 26 naira 50 kobo. And we all know that when salaries are to be paid, the executive arm at both the national and subnational level get their payments first. They're never owed. They know how to receive the money firsthand. Then by the time you finish, you struggle to pay up 60% of salaries. You then have capital expenditure. So it's no secret we're in a dire situation, and they're strongly advising that Nigeria should not borrow any more money because it will become increasingly harder to service our debt payments and to prevent Nigeria from going into default on its existing debts. Now, why is this important? The current administration has plans to borrow more money because they believe that they need some considerable amount of cash, preferably through borrowings, to stimulate the economy and get various sectors of the economy to start showing real signs of growth. And they believe that by borrowing the large sums of money, the exact quantum not yet specified, that they will start to see $6 to $8 billion of monthly inflows from foreign portfolio investors and foreign direct investors. How that is going to happen, no details. They also believe that if they collect this cash, they can then grow the Nigeria's external reserves to about between 50 and $60 billion. Again, no details. Now, you cannot continue to borrow your way out of trouble. Now, they've removed the fuel subsidy. The naira is free floating, which are good steps, and they've introduced 7.5% value-added tax on diesel, and there are proposals to add petrol to that. Now, there's a limit to which you can try to add Nigerians to the tax bracket, to be captured by the tax bracket. You must remember that if you haven't created an enabling economic environment, rather than getting the money you have projected to receive, what will rather happen is a lot more businesses will fold up because they simply cannot survive. Now, if we do not borrow this money, or for whatever reason we cannot borrow, either the National Assembly shuts it down, which is unlikely, or the foreign creditors refuse to give it to us, what's the plan B? What's the alternative plan? Because I would have expected, it's almost a month this current administration has been in office. I have not heard one cost-cutting measure announced. Not one. From reduction of aids to reduction of cars, even to reduction of salaries or allowances, I haven't heard a single thing. Rather, it's how to overburden the common Nigerian man, the common Nigerian woman, as if they are the only ones who were born to sacrifice, who were born to endure pain, who were born to endure less than optimal governance. And that has to stop. There must be a plan. Stop giving us sound bites. And I wish they would respect the DMO and adhere to this advice. No surprises. If they remove the head of DMO, I would not be surprised. But you cannot continue to borrow your way out of trouble. There has to be a better plan. It's just like labor. Once there's a problem, the first thing that crosses their minds is strike. No, there has to be a better way. And I'm not holding my breath out, but let's see if they can come up with a better way.
All right, let's move on to Punch. The Enugu state government has disclosed plans to earmark a huge part of land to boost cassava production for export, hoping that this will create jobs for the youth. And this is a partnership between the Enugu state government and the federal government.
So I'm a firm believer in the state government doing a lot more to generate revenue that limits or that reduces their dependence on the federal allocation. So this looks like a good thing. I hope they actually do go through with it. I'm not quite sure what kind of support they require from the federal government, but I also hope that they get it. However, what I'd like to say is that it appears as though they're focusing just simply on food crops, and it doesn't clearly state whether it's for local consumption or for export. Um, I would suggest that they would need to look at where we can earn the highest derivable income from, which is most likely from exporting. So if they choose to go with food crops, then export. But however, they could also produce biofuel. Sorry, not biofuel. Ethanol, which is useful in alcohol, is useful in pharmaceuticals, useful in beauty industry as well, and which would most likely earn a greater income for them, rather than just focusing on food crops. However, what that would also do is it would probably also impact on the local or on the local price of cassava products, current existence like Gary, for example. I remember when I can't was it a private export or when the potential for cassava was first realized, and people started making ethanol locally and then exporting it. It's made the price of Gary increase a bit. So there's also the potential for this to happen, but well, if the state is earning income, hopefully there's a lot more money to be able to cushion these things for the citizens.
All right, thank you for that. Let's go on to a few messages coming through. Izehi says, please tell Gbubemi I take exception to calling non-teaching staff of universities non-academic. That's what they are called because they are non-academic staff. So the academic staff handle the teaching and the non-academic staff handle everything else relating to administration. One cannot work without the other. So yes, they are non-academic staff. And let's see, Dan Okuda says, it's tragic for anyone to contemplate salary increase for politicians at this time. And let's see what JJ says. JJ says the president never said anything about reducing cost of governance during his manifesto, as far as I can remember. And let's go on to a final message. All right, Austin, once again, you'll be clouded with ethnic sentiment. It's 2023. I'm sure you can do better. Not everything is linked to ethnicity and gender. I think we'll put you on pause so you can have a mindset shift, hopefully. And that is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your messages. And special thanks to our analysts as well, Mr. C and Gbubemi, for coming through.
You're welcome.
Do stay with us. There is a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.